part of tonight. And I'd like to introduce, for those of you who don't know, Karen Flynn is our church librarian, and Karen is going to talk tonight about banned books. And I think, Karen, you have a display in the library.
Yeah.
Are they all the banned books, or just the sample?
Just the ones we have in the church library.
So take a look at those afterwards if you'd like. So, Karen, do you want the mic?
Yeah, okay, am I in the proper place? Yeah, thank you. As you can see, we're being recorded this evening. Thank you to Patera for helping with that. And I've already been asked if there are handouts or pieces of paper where people can write notes, and the answer is no, I didn't do any of that. But anything that's offered in the presentation that you might want to get back to later, either I can get it to you, or you can get it through the presentation, or we can post it somewhere, yeah. So don't worry about not being able to recover any information you might like to have. And as it was mentioned by Jan, when Pastor Christine and I talked about this quite some time ago, we did want to combine this presentation with a display in the church library. And some of you may remember we did this about 3 years ago, and there was a lot of interest, to my surprise. It was seemed to be informative for people, so a good opportunity to reconnect with it. And I hope you'll stop in, take a look at some of the books that some people think are worth banning. My favorite these days is The Big Book of Cats and The Big Book of Dogs. No, we won't go there right now. We'll come back to that. Okay, as you all know, we're here to talk about banned books because in the United States, we're seeing a really unprecedented rise in the incidence of book challenges and book bans. So we'll talk about why those challenges are arising, who is undertaking these challenges, and what kind of appropriate responses there are for those of us who might wish to see other types of action taken. My own interest in the topic kind of comes with my being in the library profession for many years. I got a degree in library and information science and took myself off to 3M Company to become a technical librarian. And I cannot tell you that books on powder metallurgy or adhesive formulations are pay dirt for book censorers. I didn't have to deal much with people challenging books at 3M, but I did keep my connections with the library community. And one of the first things you learn is that one of the premier organizations advocating for right to read and freedoms of information is the American Library Association. And they have an Office of Intellectual Freedom, which is extremely active in this area, and is one of the organizations I'll be referring to and taking data from as we talk. Let's start with a couple questions just to kind of determine some demographics for this group. How many of you regularly read pornography? I kind of see a show of hands. 0. How many of you make a point of reading seditious literature or works on how to overthrow the government? I know it's tempting. No, okay. How many of you enjoy reading works that express hatred and oppression of minorities, ethnic and racial minorities, women, and other less privileged groups? Well, this is quite a dull group. Okay, well, we'll move on. Let's talk about some definitions. Here's why I have to do multimedia here. I have to hold on to this and do this. Oh, look at that. I haven't done it in 17 years, Mike, but it's coming back. Yes. In the media, you will hear book banning referred to in a variety of ways, and I think the most well-recognized is book banning itself. Technically, book banning is the act of having a book removed from potential readership through the action of an individual or a group that, for whatever reason, objects to its content. To have a book banned, you usually have to have a book challenge, which is whatever the act is where somebody comes forward and says, I object to this content and I don't think people should be able to access it. And then you might also see book censorship, and that would include both of the previous two, plus other kinds of ways in which people are kept away from potential reading material, either by having material taken out of libraries, stolen, vandalized, having book displays disrupted, having librarians intimidated, having selection policies changed, or lots of other fun approaches which we can talk more about. If you want to know what kinds of content cause challenges, I suspect you would be able to guess most of these without too much difficulty. At the moment, the fad is GLBT-oriented materials, anything to do with gender identity, sexuality, especially materials targeted to young people, teens and young adults, and also, to my undying sorrow, racially oriented books, or any narratives that highlight the experience of persons of color or the difficulties of integrating people of color into the white experience, those kinds of things. There's a strong and well-organized effort to get those narratives off the shelf. Book banning is not anything new. There's been book banning as long as there have been books, or actually before there were books. So even when there were only manuscripts or scrolls, we have records from the ancient civilizations that say they were fought over, argued over, and taken away from time to time. It would not surprise me if there were pressure groups advocating to have a couple commandments scratched off the stone tablets, because it does go back to as long as people have been capturing their ideas in any kind of permanent media. People have been trying to get rid of it. Just a fun factoid. The first documented book ban in the United States is dated to 1637, and it was, well, you've got the details there, so I won't bother reading it to you, but the author wrote a tract that was somewhat critical of the Puritan government, and the Puritan government retaliated and banned his book. Governments have a long tradition of censorship. If I asked you to name an example of government censorship, what would you say? Any government anywhere in the world. North Korea, okay. I was guessing somebody would immediately say Nazi Germany and the book burnings, because that was so much in the public eye. Interesting thing about that is it wasn't really the government. It was mostly overzealous young university students who had been indoctrinated with Nazi propaganda and decided to carry their beliefs forward by burning a bunch of books. And there were lots of property destroyed and lots of people scared, and it stayed in people's minds. But there's probably not a government in the world that doesn't have some example of banned literature of some kind. Also, religious organizations, to no one's surprise, have a history of trying to inculcate a certain ideology from among their followers. And my favorite example would be the Roman Catholic Church, the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, which I like a lot because it's a good Latin phrase and because it's a double genitive, so that's cool. Basically means the Index of Prohibited Books, which the Catholic Church maintained for over 300 years, finally abandoned in 1966, and was the Catholic Church's set of decrees as to what they had considered appropriate for their congregations to read. So it wasn't really censorship in the sense that they didn't police people's ability to read it, but it was very strong guidance as to what was considered appropriate. But they have now let it lapse. There is just too much contemporary literature for the Catholic Church to keep up with. And then probably what I would consider the jewel in the crown of religious book banning would have to be Salman Rushdie's Satanic Verses. And I'd like to know how many of you remember the big flap in 1989 when the government of Iran issued a fatwa against Salman Rushdie for what was considered to be blasphemous writings in his book, The Satanic Verses. And in this fatwa, faithful Muslims were given license to kill Rushdie. And a lot of them tried. Now, I'm pleased to say that Rushdie is still alive. The fatwa is still in effect. And the poor man has spent the better part of 35 years in hiding. So if anybody thinks that words do not have power, they most definitely do, because that book incited violence and protests all over the world. It was banned in 20 countries. It caused governments to break diplomatic relationships with each other. It brought nations to the brink of war. It was quite an amazing experience, all for the sake of a book, which you may check out of the church library later if you like to. Now quickly, I'll show you a few numbers. How legible is this for you folks in the second tier of tables? Not? Okay, well, like I said, I'll hit the high points, and then by all means, if you'd like copies of any of these, first of all, they're on the web, but secondly, I can make sure that you get them. This basically says who's doing the censoring, in what venues is it happening, and in what forms is it happening. Who's doing the censoring is a change these days from what it was even 5 or 10 years ago. It used to be parents of school-age children, concerned local citizens, strolling into libraries and saying, look at this book, it has a naked baby in it, we want it out. Now it is coordinated and organized pressure groups who convene at the national level and have chapters all over the country, and people who operate on the local level to go to their local chapters and push agendas for book banning. Where these happen, these figures show that 55% of challenges occur in public libraries and about 40 in school libraries, the rest in other situations, so that's not too terribly surprising. And then also you can see here some of the other kinds of things that take place, which is the vandalism, the interfering of book displays, the harassment of authors, the targeting of book fairs and publishers. So these are all forms of censorship. Here's a snapshot of challenges by states. This is from 2015. The color intensity relates to the number of challenges, number of unique titles challenged technically. And you can see at that time, California was in the lead, if we can call it a lead, or maybe in the lagging. And that number on that scale is about 35 to 40 books challenged. In 2024, this is the picture. And you can see that our front runners have changed. Currently, the media are highlighting Florida as the state with the highest number of book bans. That's not reflected here, but this is 2024 data. ALA has not released 2025 data yet. You can see that our most lively book challenging states are Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and Iowa, which I think is kind of interesting. Minnesota is not colorless on this chart. So what's going on in Minnesota? These are some of the headlines you might have seen in the media. General things about book bans being on the rise in our state. Perhaps most visibly in the recent past, a challenge to St. Francis High School in Anoka County, whose school board approved a process by which additions to the school library all had to be run against a website called BookLooks, which took books and gave them a rating according to their content from 1 to 5. And this website was authorized and monitored by a conservative leading organization called Moms for Liberty. And the conclusion was if a book received a rating of 3 or higher on that site, then it was not suitable for general display. And there either had to be more dialogue about it or it was out. Next to that, you see a headline saying that pressure groups got themselves together and challenged that decision. And to me, it's good news that we can say that at the present time, St. Francis has changed their position. The missing books have been restored to the shelves, and they have accepted that the book look site, which actually has been taken down now, it will not be used, so that's a good thing. However, next door in Stillwater, they had an incident, had a couple of books for small children donated. One was about a trans person, and one was about a gay grandpa. And the library staff thought those were not suitable for little people and kept them off the shelves. And as far as I know, that's still the standing decision. But these things change frequently. So we have plenty of things to keep us busy in this state. Fortunately, our fine governor has signed a bill prohibiting book bans in the state of Minnesota. That took effect in August, and it is one of 6 or 7 similar legislative activities around the country. We have some peer states who are doing similar things, and among other things, it challenges what was becoming very worrisome in some other conservative states' activities, which was the direction toward criminalizing librarians themselves. So making librarians legally liable if censorship laws were infringed. The news isn't all good. The book bans are still going on, kind of under the shelf in new ways. So it's still really important that those of us who are committed to freedom to read keep our eyes out, participate in local arenas where books are discussed, be it school boards, library boards, neighborhood groups, and if we become aware of censorship going on, speak up about it so that it can be examined. Here are some of the other states where things are going on. Without any labels, you could tell which are the conservative-leaning states and which are the liberal-leaning states. Fortunately, there's good numbers of both at the present time, but there's a lot of activity underway, particularly on the conservative side, and it is worrisome. Okay, we've talked a lot about who's challenging and how they're challenging and where they're challenging. Now we want to talk about what they're challenging. These are the top 10 most challenged books of 2024, according to the American Library Association. And again, I don't know how visible this is to those of you who aren't real close. It's all online, so we'll make sure you get access to it. But I'll just highlight a couple of them for you. The number 1 book is called All Boys Aren't Blue. It's a memoir of a gay man of color. It's won prizes, been very highly regarded, but it does depict that difficult time in one's life when one is coming to grips with one's sexual identity. And so it has, plenty of people who object to its being suitable for young people. Many of these are focused on young adults. Many of them are focused on gender identity and LGBT issues. Not all are. Toni Morrison's Beloved is a kind of a continuous representative on this top 10 list. And Toni Morrison has other books also that are regularly challenged. She is such a powerful representative of the Black experience in the United States that, the opportunity as a white person to have the privilege of hearing through her words and through her eyes, what's that like? It's such, to me, it's such a powerful thing. I hate the idea that people object to it, but it's very frequently done. We only have one of these in our church library, which is John Green's Looking for Alaska. And this one, I'll be honest with you about this. I read it. I had a hard time with it. If I were selecting books and I had already read this one, would I have put it on the shelf? I'm not sure. Not because it talked about gay issues or sexuality or drugs, but because the focus is on a group of teens in a boarding school and the normalization of behavior that it shows in terms of their day-to-day lifestyles. I just wanted to say, no, that's not how we want teens to think of a normal lifestyle. But because I believe in freedom to read, this book is on our shelves, and maybe some of you will be intrigued and go read it after this presentation. So the other one that's interesting is Sold. And that is a 2008 publication. And for some reason, it's gotten attention and it's come back on the list. It's been there for 2 or 3 years now. It was a UMW reading program book several years ago. I'll bet some of you read it. So it was long enough ago that I decided that we'd had all the readers we were going to have, and I withdrew it. And now I want it back. So that gives you a flavor for what's on the top 10 list. I'm going to stop here and say, I should have said your questions were welcome. Anybody have any questions they want to ask right now?
So Karen,
Barb.
sort of, through history in the U.S., have there been big increases in book banning, and then has it sort of died down, and, so does it sort of go like this? And if it has, are there any things we can learn that help to make the issue sort of die down?
Question is, in case, again, for people who may not be able to hear perfectly, are these trends cyclic? And if so, what would we expect in seeing this die down, or factors that would change the way they occur? And generally what you see right now is people saying, we have not seen anything like this since the McCarthy era. And before that, never. So I think we have to take it very seriously indeed. Other questions? Yeah, Jody?
The
Josie?
Minnesota law, I presume, does that have any effect on private schools?
The question is, does it apply to private schools?
Yeah.
Boy, not being a lawyer, I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
We can look into that, and maybe other people would be interested in that answer too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not going to try and pretend I have legal knowledge, because I don't. I actually have my cheat sheet on all the laws, because so many of them have these unique aspects to them. Like in one state, you can't say gay, and in one state, you have to go through this kind of process or that kind of process, and you really have to be a specialist.
I'll tell you, we didn't have, LGBT plus books in private schools that I grew up in, but I wonder if...
Well, how many of us had LGBT books in any of the schools we grew up in?
Yeah.
So, well, of course, that was me, and this is you, so that's very different. But, yeah. Other questions? Yeah, Jay.
I just want to make a statement about Iowa. I'm from Iowa, and they've actually codified through statute that the books that any books that they find offensive, that they have to be literally physically apart from kids. So, like, case in point, there's a small town by where I grew up where they shared a library with the high school because that's the only way they could afford it. And now they had to take all those kids' book out of the library at school because they were too close. So this town now doesn't have a library because they can't afford a standalone library because of the change of law. So that's how strict the state of Iowa has become about their books.
Yeah, Iowa was an early law passer. And my understanding is since they were passed, the courts have struck down a number of the parts of the laws. Again, I'm not enough of an expert to say which and why, but it just reinforces the need to keep on top of this almost every day because it changes so fast. And the devil's in the details sometimes too, because Tennessee showed up as a state with very high numbers. But if you look at it, it's all one county. So there's an activist who's doing something in that county. Whereas if you look at Florida, it's lots of counties. So, well, historically, what are the most banned books? Where is the list of all the banned books? I just love this Reddit post. I'm looking for a comprehensive index of all books banned in America as of 2024. I want to start collecting these books to put them in a safe place so that just in case we fall into the dark ages, there is a remnant of our culture for future generations. Great, because no one has thought of that before. So, but I have sympathy with this guy because he's looking for the comprehensive list and it does not exist. We have organizations like ALA and PEN America that do their best, but their lists only go back a certain amount of time. And before that, we have nothing we can point to and say, everything you want to know about banned books is there. We also have reverse censorship. Who knows that Laura Ingalls Wilder is now evil? Yeah. Laura Ingalls Wilder's books have been targeted because of their negative portrayal of Native Americans. I mean, how many of you, like me, have read these books like 200 times? Yeah. And we know Ma hated Indians. And we know the only good Indian was a dead Indian. That's how it was in 1850. So we are, in some cases, penalizing authors of those times for not being prescient enough to write in ways that are socially acceptable to us today. And I think that's as much a mistake as going the other direction. Dr. Seuss, again, you might very well have heard of, his publisher removed 6 books of his from publication because he felt the stereotypes embedded in them had obsolesced and were no longer able to be consumed without concern of being offensive, I put it. Barb, you were first.
I just wanted to say, because I used to read the Laura Ingalls Wilder's books to my girls, and as an adult, I did see the negative portrayal of Native Americans. So then when we got to one of those passages, we just used that for discussion, and I think that's a far better approach to take to books, that no book is going to 100% agree with your values and your views, and you use those to improve your view of the world.
Dialogue takes care of a lot of issues. Joy.
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain?
Yeah.
What about him?
Huck Finn?
Yeah.
Yeah, that book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was fine for a while, but all of a sudden, you're reading about the bigger,
Right. So it's just unreasonable to expect any book, including the Holy Bible, to be able to be interpreted in the same way it was interpreted at the time of its creation. And I think astute citizens learn those skills and employ them. So, well, here's a philosophical question for you. What's the difference between banning a book and just not buying it to begin with?
You have a choice to buy it.
You have a choice, okay. What's the difference to the prospective reader who can't get hold of it between banning a book and having the library staff just not buy it?
You're policing someone else. Policing other people's.
Okay, so with the banning, it feels like there's a policing thing. But again, does the reader know that? Does it make a difference to the reader? Prospective reader? My feeling is there's only one difference, and that is that when you do selection, and I think about this because I do selection for our little library here, and especially in the areas of theology and faith, there are a lot of factors to consider. The only difference is if you do selection according to principles and a policy, which you lay out in advance and which you have your stakeholders agree to and affirm. Then when you make decisions, because nobody can buy everything, if you don't select something, at least you have made that choice based on something defensible. Otherwise, it puts you at risk of being manipulated by individual opinions, ideologies, and pressure groups. What do you think?
Perfect.
They buy it. Okay.
Karen, if you as the librarian are open to, member of the congregation saying, I think this is a great book, so then you're getting more influence than just,
Right. Again, dialogue is the best possible thing if you can get it. But I think not everybody is comfortable opening those discussions. Not everybody is even comfortable acknowledging that they might have reservations about books. I mean, Patera was telling me earlier about some things she's seen on our church website where some folks stepped in and said, well, do you really want to have those GLBT books in the hands of your young people? Well, we have to talk. So, yeah. Does book banning achieve its goal? Next question. As far as I can tell, the answer is not really. Mostly all it does is create a flap, cost money, and raise awareness on the part of people who might not even have known about the book to begin with. So throughout history, mostly what's happened is that people who hear about a banned book, the first thing they want to do is go out and read it. So, and maybe that's for the best. Now, it's hard to tot up the negative cost of some young person who was struggling with sexual identity and had no chance to read a book that might have spoken to him or her and to have helped them on a very difficult time in their life. And we know that does happen. But in the main, it fascinates me that as a human species, we keep coming back to this rather lame approach when there is no good evidence that it actually works. What's the role of a faith community in this debate? Why are we even talking about this? It's not really a church issue. In fact, I would submit to you that as a church, we're one of those groups that's in the business of pushing ideologies. And as I have alluded, sometimes looking at potential materials for the church library and trying to separate those whose ideology is congruent enough with United Methodism to be suitable for us, those that are not congruent but present useful and challenging alternative points of view, and those that are just totally unacceptable is not easy to do. But yet churches have gotten very involved in this dialogue. And for example, United Methodist Church has actually taken a position opposing book bans. It is not in the social principles per se, but it is in the resolutions, and it is in a number of other documents that have been published over time. So I feel proud of our church that we've done that. We are joined by the UCC, who typically are a very forward-thinking denomination, and some groups of churches like the National Council of Churches and the Interfaith Alliance, who are very active in opposing book bans. I like this statement from the UMC Justice webpage. And again, I know this is text. I mostly just wanted you to see that it's there, but I want to read one or two sentences to you. Banning books supports a misguided revisionism that erases potential aspects of our past, hindering us from knowing historical truth that help move us toward a more just and equitable society. The other notable dimension of book bans is the exclusionary nature, which runs contrary to the message of inclusion we profess in our faith. Taking away access and representation sends a message of exclusion. Taking away books by and about LGBTQ and people of color sends the message that their existence and experience as fellow children of God is somehow less valid or altogether invalid. And I struggle to find those kinds of words sometimes, so I really like that statement. Well, I'll leave you with another philosophical question. Is it ever the right thing to do?
Well, I wouldn't think that it would be censorship necessarily, but you wouldn't have children reading the same books you have adults. There are some.
I gotta come over there, Carol, because I can't hear. She's masked.
I'm just saying that you would have different books for children than you would have for adults, so there's some type of censorship going on when you're picking books.
Right. I think what you're saying is age appropriateness is always going to be an issue. I mean, nobody's trying to say that all books are appropriate for all ages, right? So some of that's fine. You might want to make a case that some publications which directly affect national security might be justifiable. But in general, tell me a time in history when it was the good guys banning books. And I don't think most of us could ever cast our minds over our knowledge of history and come up with a time when we say, boy, I'm glad those XYZites banned those books, because it sure has given us better lives. I've never seen a talk show participant who stood up there and said, I'm sure glad I didn't read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, because I've had so much of a better life for not reading it. Most of the time. If you want to know more, and again, I can get these links to anybody who is interested, The 4 organizations I would bring to your attention: the American Library Association, and they have a subgroup, Unite Against Book Bans, which is very activism-oriented. PEN America, which fundamentally is about supporting authors and publishing, but focuses on much the same issues. And then the International Library, or International Literacy Association also has a lot of things, especially around advocacy for children. Also, did you know that if you're between 13 and 21 and you don't have access to some banned book, you can get a library card through several affiliated libraries, including the Brooklyn Library System, and get access to any banned book you would like to through them. All you have to do is apply. The challenge is getting that message out, but it's a statement. Banned Books Week is coming up in early October. This is our theme for this year. George Takei is our, I forget what they called him, kind of our grand marshal for this year's Banned Books Week. And he himself has written a graphic novel that's been subject to challenge. It's about experiences of Japanese Americans at Manzanar. It's on the shelf in the church library. So keep your eyes open for information about this upcoming event. Please come and browse in the church library. And I hope this has just brought us all a renewed awareness of what's going on and what are some of the kinds of things that we can be aware of and do about it. Barb Hins.
I know I'm talking way too much, but the one positive is it speaks to the power of books. That people are lucky to ban them. If we didn't think books made any difference in people's lives, no one would be upset about this.
So think about this too. Why books? Why not movies? Why not song lyrics? I always wonder about that. I mean, certainly, we have a rating system for movies and stuff, and that helps. And movies are not as prominent in school libraries, but they carry the same messages with the same kinds of impact, or perhaps more. And movies in particular reach the young people a lot more readily. Trust me on that. Any other questions I can answer? Oh yeah, Pastor Chris?
I like the point that you're making right now. Movies have a rating system.
Yeah.
So right now, if I understood you right, the librarian is the person that's deciding what's going into the library that they're responsible for?
Varies from library to library. Usually there are selection committees, or there might be an acquisitions librarian who abides by some policy.
Is that part of the problem, is that there isn't a group of people that decide on the rating of a movie, so there's guidance for the parents or the library about the content?
I would say...
Age appropriateness, like you're saying,
Yeah.
I think is probably a fair thing to discuss. I know in raising 4 daughters, probably the biggest challenge I had was other parents with very different values,
Yeah.
whether it be extremely conservative values or very liberal values. The parent that would say, I'd rather have my kids drinking with me than, not.
Right.
So they had no problem with my kids drinking with their kids at their house. And then I'm thinking, I'm not in favor of that particular thing. And there'd be very conservative people that wouldn't want their kids exposed to something, so nobody's kids are going to be exposed to something.
Right.
And it seems like with books, is there any rating system? Is there any way to the librarian probably isn't going to read every single book that they order? Have some guidance from somebody.
There's no universal rating system. There are lots of publications that do review books and often do a really good job of calling out matter that might be considered controversial. My guess about your original question, which is it just that the people aren't abiding by selection policies or not involving the right stakeholders? I suspect it's more that they're not communicating their policies broadly enough. I'll bet you almost every library has a good selection policy, but people may not realize it. It's possible also that if they read it, maybe they wouldn't agree with it. But first they have to know it's there.
Sure, that's going to
We have a collection development policy for our library. I'm sure you've all read it.
Of course.
So, yeah, but for what it's worth, we do have one. So, and we also have a policy about age appropriateness. So,
It's a great presentation. I really appreciate it.
other questions? I'm sorry, you're not allowed to ask questions. You should know the answers already.
I just read something this morning by a pretty conservative author.
Up to you.
Is this helpful?
We're shy people in our family.
The coffee shop always makes me repeat myself anyway. But it was, something gave me a little bit of pause because it was talking about censorship by the liberal community, of which I am part. And just, I'll give it one example, one or two examples. And we remember when COVID happened. And do you remember when there were many articles about COVID escaping from the Chinese lab? And the left wing was not very happy about that. They said there's no evidence of that, which there was not at the time very much. Now it's not nearly as clear as it was then. And they want newspapers to just stop printing stuff like that. And there's several other things like that that's actually pretty common on the left. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Others? I can't pull it back to you, I don't think. Maybe I can, Christine. Here you go.
I just wanted to build off of what was being said about age appropriateness. And one of the things that, if you have kids or grandkids in schools, you might be aware of this, but one of the things that is sort of a paradigm shift that's happening, it's not so much a question about when is a kid ready to see a book with, two people who kiss in the book. Is that 10? Is that 13? Is that 16? But it's become more, when is it appropriate for kids to know that queer people exist? These aren't books about relationships. These aren't books about physical intimacy or public displays of affection. These are books like, my friend's moms take her to the park and they like the swings. So that shift, I think, is just something that we're seeing more and more of, and I wanted to just name that in the question about age appropriateness. Some of it really is just about, we don't all agree how mature a kid is at 15 years old and what is appropriate for them to handle. But now we're getting to a point where we're like, there are entire demographics of people, sexually, racially, ableist ways, where we just don't have representation of them anymore because it's not okay for kids to realize that those people exist in our world anymore. And so I just wanted to make that distinction and that caveat to the age question.
Thank you, Christine. Are there other comments people would care to share? Yes? You have to step to me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I similarly just piggybacking off that, I wish I could remember the name of the book, but it was a book written for a middle school age audience about a middle school age black boy who really liked comic books and was a nerd. Everything about the book was very pretty light stuff, but there was a chapter where there was a white bully who bullied the black kid, and that was enough to get a parent to say well, my black son is gonna feel ashamed about himself if he associates with the white bully. So even that minimal amount of stuff is getting on the plan.
On the PEN America top list is Jodi Picoult's 19 Minutes. That book has one page devoted to a date rape scene. And it is, as I haven't read it, but as I understand it, it's reasonably explicit. But it is done within the context of the story. It's not pornographic, it's not sensational. But that one page has been enough to get that book banned more than almost any other book. And one of the hallmarks of these general attempts being made to remove or censor books is that often they're people who've been instructed to go to their libraries or schools and give them a list and say, these are books that we want gone, but they have not necessarily themselves read the book, nor taken the time to form a personal impression of it. So that is a basis on which pushback can be made. Well, if there are no more questions, again, I'd like to thank you. I would really like to thank the Faith in Action team for organizing the event, for providing the dinner, and for the volunteers for bringing the food. It's a lot of work. Thank you for what you do.